Hi, I am Jennifer Purcell, and welcome to my podcast, Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge, where we will discuss, discover, and learn more about the challenges and triumphs of those with NLD and other learning challenges. I do have a website for this podcast, and it is called livingwithnld.com. I also have a Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter account for the podcast. They are all under the same name, which is Living with NLD. I also have a YouTube channel for the podcast, which can be found by Googling the title of the podcast, which is Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge. I would like to tell you about a nonprofit that I use for my research for this podcast. It is called the NVLD Project, and I use their blog for my research. They are a nonprofit that is based in New York and is trying to get NVLD back on the DSM, and they provide many resources for people with NVLD on their website. I'll provide you with the website for them in the podcast description. All proceeds from the ads on this podcast will be donated towards the NVLD project. Please feel free to explore the other topics on the podcast, and hopefully you will learn something new from them. I hope you enjoy today's episodes.
Good evening. So today's podcast will be an interview with me and Myk Media. He is another one of the project social ambassadors for the NLD project, and I will be interviewing him on his life with NLD and him being a graphic designer and filmmaker, and how he enjoys doing that, and how he enjoys living on the East Coast as well, and exploring his challenges that he feels with NLD. And this is the first part of the interview, so there will be another part that will be posted in a couple weeks. So I hope you enjoy listening to Myk and me. Good morning, and I hope you are enjoying the new podcasts that I created, which, again, if you haven't heard of them, one of them is called Shiro, Be Your Own Hero, and that one was about heroism and inspiring yourself to be your own hero in your life instead of trying to look for others to be your hero or mentors. And then the second one is called Think Out for Your Imagination, and that one is about the imagination I had when I was growing up and how I imagined that I could fold up my house into pocket size and take it with me wherever I wanted. And then the next one is Chats, Barks, and Growls, Combos with Your Pet. That one is probably the most fun one because I get to do my voice. And I get to do Truffle's voice. And just, tell you what I think dogs think throughout the day and what they think about their owners. So that one's fun for me.
And today I am very excited to announce that BetterHelp is now sponsoring this podcast. I have had 7 years of therapy, so I know it can help change your life if you not only let it, but work on the personal goals that you set with your therapist. Without a healthy mind, being truly happy and at peace is hard. The good news is therapy works. But what is therapy exactly? It's whatever you want it to be. Maybe you're not feeling motivated right now and would like some tools to help. Or maybe you're feeling insecure in relationships at work, not dealing well with stress. Whatever you need, it's time to stop being ashamed of normal human struggles and start feeling better because you deserve to be happy. And now you don't have to worry about finding an in person therapist near you to help. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist. So you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's more affordable than in person therapy, and you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours. Join the millions of people who are seeing what online therapy is really about. It's always a good time to invest in yourself because you are the greatest asset. And special offering to listeners of Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge. You can get 10% off your first month of professional therapy at betterhelp.com slash, I'll put in the link in the podcast description for you. That's BetterHelp, HELEP. Thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this podcast. I also want to mention to you that I just launched my podcast swag on Wednesday of this week and have a page for it on my website. And I will also send you the link to it in the podcast description. And I will also send it to you in the newsletter that I usually send out on Fridays. I am now selling t-shirts, water bottles, and a backpack, and they all have the podcast logo and title on it and the tagline. So I am looking forward to watching the sales and seeing who buys them, and spreading the word more about my podcast. Okay, hello, audience of Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge. I am here today with Myk, and I'm going to interview him on his life with NLB and ask him about questions with the MBLB project as well, because he's one of the project social ambassadors. And I will begin by having him introduce himself.
Yes, I go by Myk Media. I'm an artist, illustrator, animator, jack of all trades, and essentially master of none.
And where are you from, Myk?
I'm from Florida. I live in Florida, and yeah, I've been here since about 2001, and I've lived in Colorado, Arizona, Montana,
Mm-hmm.
all over the place.
Yeah, so I'll introduce myself too. Many of you already know me. I'm Jennifer, and I have NLD and chronic migraines. I consider those two disabilities, or as I like to call it, a challenge that I deal with. And my job, well, it's kind of like yours too, Myk, where I do a lot of things. I'm a Jill of all trades. And I work with my parents who created a nonprofit, and so I help them out by being their admin assistant, their tech and social media support, and I also help with cleaning the physical building. So COVID hygienist.
Awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's fun because I never get tired of what I'm doing because I'm not doing the same thing every single day.
Mm-hmm.
I have a variety of things I do. So with that, I was going to ask you, what brought you to being a filmmaker and animator?
Well, I it's funny. When I was a kid, I had obsessions,
Mm-hmm.
and I was obsessed. I had just delved into world building and worlds and escapism, and that was my thing. And my dad knew that I was kind of like quirky,
Mm-hmm.
and as we'll go into the interview later, I was a late diagnosis. And my dad knew I was quirky, and with that, he didn't think that I would excel in anything other than something creative.
Mm-hmm.
And so I told him at one point I wanted to go to college, and he
Mm-hmm.
said, "You're going to fail if you go to college." He straight up said, "You're going to fail if you go to college. Don't even try." Which I ended up going to college and succeeding, but took a lot of work.
Yeah.
But I did go to a film school, and what's funny is what led me to that was just my imagination and stuff, and I don't know whether my dad was being supportive or whether he was just thinking, well, he was limiting me. So I don't know if it was, I don't know which one it was. So that's kind of what led me to that. I was super obsessed with movies. I had my obsessions. I had my interests when I was younger, and I still have those. And so I just tried to make a buck out of it.
That makes sense. Um, what's one of your favorite things about being a filmmaker or an animator?
Well, it's basically the nice thing about animating. The big thing that I've been doing lately is freelance animation, freelance animated music videos. And I love it's just kind of like you can kind of just let your mind wander, escape, and just let the music kind of direct your ideas. And what's great about that is it's really free form. It's really kind of it's really free form, and it's there's not a lot of occupations that allow a free form kind of thinking process.
Yeah.
And that's what I liked about that.
Well, I can kind of relate to being creative because I am very creative with the podcast.
Oh yeah, that's that in itself. It's not like it's not a cut and dry thing,
Right.
And a podcast it does take a lot of editing and assembling, and when you think a little bit differently, it's kind of like you can kind of relate. It's you like making stuff.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, see, so it's we can kind of relate there.
Yeah, we
It's
can.
that thing.
Yeah, I have my own obsessions, as you call them too, where I really like music also. I like listening to music, and I like singing songs. I don't know if I'm good at singing, but I do it anyways because I think it's fun. And I have the podcast that has become a passion of mine as well for the last year or so that I've been doing it. And it's so cool because, and you might have had this feeling before, where you kind of create something, you can see it grow. I know it's not a physical thing, but it's a virtual thing, and you can see it grow by looking at how many people listen to it and play it, or if it helps them, they comment on it in some way. And you can see, how certain topics are popular and certain ones aren't so popular,
Oh, absolutely. You can actually you can see something that you're creating taking a life of its own, and you can actually see the impact that it's making.
Yeah.
Aside from making movies, I also sometimes do event production, event promotion. And one of the things, sometimes you sit there when you're making something, you don't think that you're making an impact, and then all of a sudden afterwards people come back and say, I like that thing you did. And you're like, oh, have you had that occur?
Yes. I remember when I started the podcast, I didn't know the impact it would have. I just thought it would be, something for people like more neurotypical, so people with NLD that would use it. But I am so glad that it's both, because it's really, I did create it to create more awareness about NLD, but I wasn't sure how much it was gonna help people with NLD, I guess, because I've never met somebody physically with NLD, it's just, I only know me.
It's funny because yeah, me neither. Actually, it's funny. I didn't even, like I mentioned previously, I was diagnosed late in life.
Yeah. So why don't you tell me a little bit about your diagnosis?
Well, I always had, my thing was is I was bad at peopling. my
Mm,
and I couldn't determine whether it was, so like I said, where I lived in Colorado, Montana, Arizona,
mhm,
then Florida, and we moved around a lot. So
mm,
I couldn't determine whether it was the fact that I moved a lot or if I just was that weird. And I just I couldn't put my finger on it. And
mhm,
one of the moments I remember specifically, I was in a social situation, and they're everyone was sitting there talking about relatives moving,
mhm.
and I wanted to join in on the conversation. I said, and my grandfather moved away from Germany to get away from the Nazis. Yeah, I thought I was joining in on the conversation, only to realize it's as if someone threw a dead cat into the field, because everyone stopped what they were doing. They stared at me and they're like, "What are you talking about?" And I had so many. That was my childhood. Can you relate? Yeah,
Yes, that's why I'm laughing. Um, like I'm not laughing at what happened to you, but I'm laughing because I can relate.
yeah. Where you're just
Because
like, you're talking to someone, and it's mostly afterwards you're like, what have I done?
yeah, and you're not
Yes.
aware of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that was the big thing. And so my whole thing when I was younger, it was just a lot of that, and I just didn't know what. And so it was a combination of being the new kid, just being quirky as all heck, and so those two things. And I think it wasn't until later, my I had this one girlfriend, and right before I had the girlfriend, my dad was insistent upon researching neurodivergent
Mm,
traits,
mhm,
and he found several that he thought fit my criteria. And I mentioned this to my at the time girlfriend, and she said, "Well, you can't self-diagnose. You can't self-diagnose. It's not. That's not true. That's not what you are. You can't self-diagnose." And she's like, and she just thought that I was just just weird, and that's it. And I wanted to get to a point where I wanted to figure this stuff out. Going back to the college comment where my dad was like, "You can't go to college," I'm like, I got to a roadblock, which my dad always said would be math.
mhm,
And relatable. Um,
mhm,
so they said, you can actually get through this, but with some help. And I said, what do you mean? They said, if you get diagnosed, and the college will actually pay for it. I'm
mm,
like, really? And it was a whole program. And so I got diagnosed, and the person to diagnose me, she actually said, now you are on this line that if somebody else might say Asperger's, but she said, I'm saying NVLD.
mhm.
And at that point, I walked out of the room and I said, what is nonverbal learning disorder? I had no clue.
Didn't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, but at the same time, I felt um, vindicated that I'm not completely weird. However, it's, it's really strange because um, I don't know. After you got diagnosed, I kind of felt good and bad at the same time, because it's like I felt good because it's not all my fault, but then I felt
Mhm.
not good because I'm like, well, now I'm more self-conscious.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I can relate to that in a lot of ways. For me, I kind of felt I was quirky and weird too. Growing up, so for me, I was homeschooled with my brother, so I didn't have a traditional education up until college.
That might have saved you a little bit.
Yeah, I think so in some ways. Yeah. But I always compared myself to my brother, who is neurotypical, because I was trying to figure out why are some things easier for him and not for me, you know? Like math was always hard for me too. I had to have tutors, not just for math, but for most of my subjects in school. And I was trying to figure out why I needed so much help to pass my classes. And that was thinking in my mind when I was in high school, and realizing that I was different from everybody else in my family. I just didn't know how or why. And then when I got to college, and I didn't think I would do well in college either. Kind of like your dad, where when I remember when I was applying to colleges, I was applying to most of the UCs, and my brother, he went to UC Berkeley, and he's 5 years older, so he was already graduated at this point. But he said to me, "Go ahead and apply to UC Berkeley because I think you might get it." You know, he was encouraging me because that's one of the hardest universities to get into in California. And I didn't think I was going to get in because my grades were great, but my SAT scores and ACT scores weren't. They were below average. So I, wasn't sure. But I tried. And I remember when I read my acceptance letter, how shocked I was still to this day.
Wow, that's awesome.
I mean, like I had to read it twice and I was like, huh, I got in.
That's awesome.
Thank you. Because like, I think when I applied, it was like 18% get accepted. It might have changed by now, but I think that was the percentage. And that's not that much. So when I read it and then I was telling my family, they were so excited and happy for me. And I remember telling my brother, actually, I left a voicemail for him and he'll remember this. But because he was working, and I left a voicemail for him and be like, call me back. and I didn't say what news it was in the voicemail because I wanted to hear his reaction to it. But when he answered the phone and called me back, I said, well, we have another bear in the family because the mascot is bear. And he was so happy. My mom was in a store, REI, I think, and she had to go outside the store when I called her because she was going to scream and she didn't want to scream inside the store.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
But then when I got to college, I realized I struggled a lot more than I did in high school with school.
Was it everything, or was it all of it that you struggled with?
It wasn't all of it. So like the classes I did struggle with were math or like had essays in it, writing. I'm good at creative writing, but not like academic essays. Sounds like you might want to say something about that.
No, it's writing in general. It's weird. It's like at first it was like technical writing was hard for me, but I think I took what skills I've learned from masking and I applied that to the technical writing. And it's just like masking is almost the same thing as technical writing, and just feeding people what they want to hear. And you know,
Mm,
because as someone who's neurodivergent, you have to mask
right.
a lot of times.
Yeah, I did an episode on that actually with masking and being authentic and trying to balance those two and be like, do I want to be my real self, real quirky weird self, or do I want to try to be neurotypical in this
It
situation?
it's weird. It occurred to me, like, I think it was like um 2 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
Some of my colleagues, I think I'm masking pretty good around. So I've got colleagues, and I think I mask pretty good on a regular basis because I'm more aware of myself, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And someone came up to me, and they one of my colleagues, they opened up a big bag of candy, and they're like, you can pick something out here because you do so much for us, even though we talk so much crap about you behind your back.
Mm-hmm.
And that hit me. And like, no matter how hard I mask, it's still there.
Mm-hmm.
hmm And I'm like, it's still visible. It's still visible. It's still, and I don't blame them. I'm just like, there's something. It's like you walk by and like, there's something up with that person, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sometimes you can tell when people walk by that they're different,
Yeah.
or usually more with how they act. Um,
hmm
but I know for me, when I got diagnosed in college, because the way I came about doing it was I had a roommate who was deaf, and she could hear because she had cochlear implants, but she knew more about the disability department of Berkeley than I did. So I was kind of asking her questions about how to get tested, um, and how to go about it if you thought you were, different, or if you thought you had a learning disability. Because I thought that was true for me. I had like a personal hunch, and um, I wanted to get as much information as I could before I told my parents about what I wanted to do, so that they could, kind of help me make the decision. Um, and I remember going through the tests and being kind of excited, figuring out what the result would be. Um, and when I got the diagnosis, I was relieved, but I was also more self-conscious, like you, where I was like, okay, now I know more about myself, but what do I do?
Exactly. Exactly. It's very strange because and it's weird because now that I'm at this point, and you asked me why I wanted to be a filmmaker, and it's like, I think the greatest answer is because I feel like I've always had a story to tell,
Mm,
and it's taken since I was a child all the way up till now to try to articulate it because I can't
mhm,
articulate it. So it's like everything that I'm making is all connected as this giant interconnected story that's telling about my struggle.
mhm,
And so that maybe hopefully other people can relate. And because that's the thing, it's hard to like, you've got these giant ideas that you try to compress into something. Do you notice that? That's like other people are like sometimes I can just be goofy. And other times I've got this massive, long-winded thing where I'm just like, and people are like, okay.
yes, I can relate to that too, where sometimes, I mean, for me, I tell my story through my podcast, which
hmm
is similar to with you with your film making. And I sometimes I think I realize I might do this with the podcast too, but I can ramble a lot, and I try to control that a little bit when I'm interviewing or doing the podcast because I don't want to get off topic too much, you know?
I try to somehow, I try to be conscious of that. I try to be conscious of that because I try to tie it back to what I'm thinking about. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
my one of my best friends when I was younger, he used to say that he said that I had a schizotypical personality because that's what he thought. He was trying to see, like, my friends were trying to diagnose me, and because I would say things and he would say, like, it just would come out of nowhere. You're just these blurts out of nowhere. And I'm like, to me, it connects. To
Yeah.
me, to me, it makes sense. It connects somehow. But yeah, it's like when you were saying, yeah, what do I do with this diagnosis? It's like literally, it's like it's weird because it is a new world. It's like it's not well known. It's not it's what I've learned is there's a new category of a new category of neurodivergent um, traits, and there's an autism spectrum, and then there's another spectrum called auditory processing disorders.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a new category which NVLD falls into. And so it's so different that it's now being talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Auditory processing. It's where it's not necessarily that we're not getting the information, it's that we process it differently, and that
Right.
we our answer to a question is like a mile long in our head.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. And like with the processing, usually, and I know it's different for each person with NLD, it takes longer for us to process what we hear and and to absorb it and to learn and be able to
And
remember it.
do you obsess over like thoughts or ideas or like concepts? Like if someone said something to you, do you just obsess and worry about it?
Yes, probably too much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I'll play it over in my head like a broken tape record or something.
Like, did I say it the right way? Did I do that the right? Did I say that the wait? Like I'll sit there. I'll say it out. I'll text it, and then I'll go back and text something, and I'll have to say to somebody, should I text this one more time? No, it's fine. That's fine. It's strange though. It's strange that it's easier for me to write a script than it is to I guess it's because you have the idea of how you think it should be constructed of a whole interaction, and I can see it, and I've written several scripts, and it's easier for me to do that than sometimes having normal conversations. It's easier for me to be on a stage and perform than it is for me to talk to, like, go to some place and talk to someone. Like if I it's weird because I was watching who was it? Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, and Ernie Hudson. They were on Seth Meyers, Late Night with Seth Meyers, and it's weird because if you watch that, Bill Murray is just messing with Dan Aykroyd. Dan Aykroyd has autism, and he's just messing with him. But the thing is Dan Aykroyd doesn't see it. He doesn't see it at all. He just thinks that he's just playing along. And I'm just like, that was me and my friends growing up. That was me and my friends, because I'm sitting there thinking, oh, they think that I'm funny. They think that this is, no, they're just messing with this guy. And so you see Bill Murray just seems like he's just the cool guy who just can't deal with this guy. That was kind of like how a lot of my interactions were. Like I got into and I think when I got a little bit more cognizant of it, it got a little bit better. Did you kind of have situations like that too, a little bit?
Um, that's a good question. I think so, but I probably wasn't aware of it at the time.
See?
I am now. Like, I was in Girl Scouts for a little bit growing up, and I remember when we were at a an outing. I think it was an American Idol concert, and um, I remember dancing to the music, and nobody really else liked how I was dancing, but I didn't care. Um, and actually, one of the cliques in the group of the Girl Scouts made fun of me and how I was dancing, and I didn't know they were making fun of me at the time. It kind of just went past me, went over my head, and
At the time, you think, oh wow, they're joining in on the fun.
yeah,
They're yeah. But then
yeah,
little do you know, yep, afterwards, there are times that I I would be hanging out with friends, and then I'm like, wait a minute, you guys are messing with me, and that's the feeling that's the feeling that I hated growing up, and oh, sorry about the neighbor's dogs.
it's okay.
um, that was the feeling that I always hated growing up. That sensation of that I'd be hanging out with these guys and I think, oh, they think I'm cool, they think I'm neat. Like one of my friends that was like one of my or I consider to be my best friend,
Hmm.
um, he had this tendency of always messing. He thought it was really funny to hang out with the special ed kids. Well,
Hmm.
the way he did that was he thought that they were quirky and different,
Hmm.
but after he passed, I was like, wait a minute, did he view us that way too?
Hmm.
And so it's it was kind of a challenging, difficult thing. But um, oh, um, I kind of have some bad news. I'm gonna have to go soon.
Oh, okay.
But would you like to do a part two?
Yeah. Do you want me to like ask some questions or like
Maybe Monday.
okay.
Monday. Yeah, sorry. I have a
Okay.
small window.
It's okay. Yeah, I can just I can edit this part out the recording. That would be easy.
Okay. Okay, we can do part two so that way you can have a nice meaty podcast.
Okay.
All right.
That's good.
So Monday it is.
All right.
Around the same time?
Probably later because I do work on Monday. Um,
We can we can actually do a little earlier, like probably like 4 my time.
which would be
No, yeah, no, 4:30 my time.
okay. I guess I was saying later for me because I don't get off until 5, so that would be 8 your time.
Yes. Does that work?
Yeah,
Okay.
if
All
that's
right.
not too late for you.
Thank you so much,
All
Jennifer.
right.
I will see you on Monday.
Okay.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. And today I am very excited to announce that BetterHelp is now sponsoring this podcast. I have had 7 years of therapy, so I know it can help change your life if you not only let it, but work on the personal goals that you set with your therapist. Without a healthy mind, being truly happy and at peace is hard. The good news is therapy works. But what is therapy exactly? It's whatever you want it to be. Maybe you're not feeling motivated right now and would like some tools to help. Or maybe you're feeling insecure in relationships at work, not dealing well with stress. Whatever you need, It's time to stop being ashamed of normal human struggles and start feeling better because you deserve to be happy. And now you don't have to worry about finding an in person therapist near you to help. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist. So you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's more affordable than in person therapy, and you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours. Join the millions of people who are seeing what online therapy is really about. It's always a good time to invest in yourself because you are the greatest asset. And special offering to listeners of Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge. You can get 10% off your first month of professional therapy at betterhelp.com/. I'll put in the link in the podcast description for you. That's BetterHelp, HELEP. Thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this podcast. As I wrap up, there are some things I would like to share with you. I do have a website for this podcast. It is called livingwithanld.com. I also have a Facebook and Instagram page for this podcast. It is called Living with NLD. I will include the links for those in the description. In conclusion, I would like to hear from my audience. If you know individuals with NLD that I could interview for this podcast, please email me at livingwithnld@gmail.com. What are you interested in learning about NLD? I know I'm not an expert, but I do know I have the living experience of having it. I would like you to practice journaling about your gifts and differences. Also see if there is a way that you can make that difference become easier for you to do than it originally was. Thank you for listening today, and please go to my YouTube channel and subscribe to it. Thank you. Bye.